Well, ladies and gentlemen, Ex-President Grímsson, ministers, excellencies, it's very nice to be here and preach the evangelium of geothermal, as I've been doing in many places. This presentation has been prepared by Ms. Ting Sheng, who is a PhD student in Iceland at the Geothermal UNU school there and the University of Iceland. Now, we have heard some good words about geothermal. I'm not going to change that. I'm just going to emphasize that the geothermal physical resource is practically unlimited. The technically, economically available resource is increasing fast with new research and development. That's our technique is improving, our exploration methods are improving, we find more and we find more ways to utilize it in a more effective way. Geothermal provides electricity and heating, but also cooling, industrial processes, horti and biocultures, recreation and a healthy lifestyle, like outdoor swimming pools in Iceland. And public health has been very much mentioned here. In the 30s, we would have a black cloud of smoke over Reykjavik. And now, on a winter day, we don't see that. The city is totally heated by geothermal, and there is no smoke generation from that. The story of the transition of Iceland from oil to geothermal heating is a very good example because it tells us how energy transition can take place and how much time it can take. If we look at the period after 1970 when we had an energy crisis and the drivers for the change were not like we are talking about today, the emissions or the pollution, it was the economy and the energy security. We didn't know if we would be able to buy oil in the coming years at that time. So there was a big effort to get rid of fossil fuels from the system because they were important. And we see that the change from 1970 to 1980 was about 4% of the total heating stock per year that was transitioned from fossil fuels to either electricity or heating. And this tells us that a total transition of electricity, of the heating system in Iceland could have be carried out in about 25 years, from 100% oil to zero. And that tells us the time scale we have to make such a transition. And we also had the same problems as we have today. People thought it was very expensive at the time, difficult, long pipelines. Iceland is not so densely populated. The longest pipeline between the well and the customer was 63 kilometers. So it was not very easy. But when it was done, it had made a basis for a very good life and good economy in Iceland. Now, geothermal heat, as I mentioned before, can be used for many purposes. Space heating is only part of it, about 70%, but we also have swimming centers, and outside we melt snow on the streets so people don't slip and fall in the winter. We can have fish farming and greenhouses and some other industrial uses. So the geothermal energy provides possibilities for new jobs, for new creation of new opportunities, aside being the changer of our heating. Of course, countries are different. We have alternative strategies for geothermal utilization. We can have shallow geothermal using the temperature of the surrounding, which is really not what we call geothermal energy, but we have in Iceland, our mean temperature is over the year is the same as for a refrigerator, 4 degrees centigrade. This is similar to what we have in Harbin in China, but when we come a little bit south here, we have, of course, temperatures in the ground that can not heat houses, but they can be a source for a heat pump, or they can also be a source for direct cooling using the magazined heat in the ground. But when we talk about deep geothermal, the real geothermal, we can have these sources from 50 to 120 degrees. They are mostly feasible for cooling and possibly some small energy generation for heating, cooling, and some small energy generation, electricity generation. And then when we dry deeper, we find higher temperatures from 150 to 350 degrees, of course different for different countries. But then we can have more electricity generation, but also provide heating and cooling and all the other things. So we have to develop slowly, like in Iceland. We started with the deep geothermal from low temperatures, mostly for heating houses. And we spent about 50 years on this before we started to try to make electricity on a larger scale. This gave us the possibility to learn all about the geology, the geophysics, the ways to handle the liquids, corrosion problems and whatever, building up knowledge that finally would bring us in electricity generation, which is of course the highest part. Now, geothermal is for a very long time, we know that in Iceland, we have experienced from 100 years, where we have used the same sources. But eventually, they are going to cool. We have to replace them. We can either go to use the shallow geothermal as a complement to fill up the gap, but this is in a very long time. But we can also drill deeper with better technologies, which we probably will have in 100 years' time, and bring warmer and more useful energy from greater depth. In Iceland, they had the privilege to run the United Nations University Geothermal Training Program, and this has been over the years producing 600 fellows. It's a postgraduate training program, and it's aimed at assisting developing countries in capacity building within geothermal exploration and development. The program consists of 6 months annual training for practicing professionals from developing and transitional countries with significant geothermal potential. A priority is given to countries where geothermal development is underway in order to maximize technology transfer. And this program has been mostly financed by the Foreign Ministry in Iceland, in cooperation with the United Nations University. And the good thing is that we have had students from about the whole world. Of course, there are major countries like Kenya, Indonesia, Philippines, and China, where we have been able to support the growing industries, but also we have students from other countries, so we have a rather good coverage, and all these students are very good ambassadors for this technology and the knowledge and experience to be found in Iceland. So with geothermal, our future was made bright, with good health, few deaths, and also to preserve the environment. And this fellow, which I met at 66 Northwest Iceland, from the region where ex-President Grímsson and I stem from, he waves and asks us to remember him, that he can enjoy his final herbal bath longer and in quiet. Thank you.